I do want to welcome everyone to tonight's virtual community engagement meeting. We'll be discussing the White Oak Federal Flood Damage Reduction Project. This virtual community engagement meeting is being offered by the Flood Control District to continue to share vital information with the community, particularly during this time when in-person meetings have been suspended due to safety concerns due to the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Emily Waddell, and I would like to emphasize that I so appreciate everyone's patience with us this evening. I'm joined tonight by a team of Flood Control District leadership and subject matter experts to ensure we continue to keep you up to date on these important flood mitigation projects in your community. We're also joined by staff from area elected official offices and community associations. Now, before we get started tonight, I'd like to kick things over to Precinct 4 Commissioner Jack Cagle, who's called in to kick things off this evening. Commissioner?
This is Jack Cagle, your Commissioner of Harris County Precinct 4. And I would like to thank you for taking time out of your evening to participate in this very important meeting. Your continued input and involvement will ensure that our community remains strong and healthy. I also would like to thank the hardworking and very skilled team at the Harris County Flood Control District for their efforts to protect us all here in Harris County from the threats of future flooding. The matters that we will discuss this evening focus on our future improvements to the White Oak Bayou that will help protect our neighborhood. Your engagement is important to all of us in Harris County Precinct 4 and in the county at large, and is a crucial part of the successful operations of the Harris County Flood Control District. Thank you again for participating in this meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner. And as he mentioned, we're so glad to see the community so engaged in this project and look forward to sharing updates. Now, before we begin, I'd like to just note that this virtual public meeting will begin with a presentation to share project updates, including the construction schedule and other important information about the White Oak Federal Project. That presentation will be followed by a virtual Q&A session with Flood Control District team members. Attendees are able to submit comments and questions through the website or via phone. Any comments not addressed during tonight's Q&A session will receive a response from the Flood Control District after the event. Instructions on how to participate in the virtual open house session are included on the slides in front of you, on this virtual meeting webpage, and on the Flood Control District website. I will also share a reminder of those instructions when we reach the Q&A portion of the meeting. I'd now like to transition the meeting over to Marcus Stuckett, our Flood Control District Engineering Division Director, who will share important information about the district and this project. Marcus, over to you.
Thank you, Emily, and a special thank you to each of you for joining us tonight. In this presentation, we'll give you a brief overview of the White Oak Bayou Federal Project. But before we get into that, we want to share some information about the Flood Control District. The Harris County Flood Control District is a special purpose district that was created by Texas legislature in 1937 in response to devastating floods that hit the Houston area in 1929 and 1935. The Flood Control District was created to serve as a local partner to leverage federal funding for flood reduction projects. Our mission has greatly expanded over 80 years with billions of dollars of infrastructure improvements in the ground. While we are a separate entity from Harris County, the Harris County Commissioners Court serves as our governing body. The mission of the Harris County Flood Control District is to provide flood damage reduction projects that work with appropriate regard for community and natural values. One of the most difficult challenges we face is constructing effective projects that are sensitive to community and natural values in a highly urbanized area. Harris County includes 22 main watersheds, totaling approximately 1,800 square miles and more than 2,500 linear miles of channel. 2,500 miles is approximately the distance from New York to California. Each watershed has its own unique characteristics and needs. Tonight, we're discussing the White Oak Bayou watershed located in central Harris County. Our area is flood prone, and here are some reasons why. We're prone to flooding because we experience extreme rainfall events such as hurricanes and tropical storms. We also have flat, slow draining topography or landscape, and we also have clay soils that do not absorb excess rainfall as quickly. The Flood Control District works with other agencies and shares jurisdiction over flooding issues in Harris County. This slide illustrates that shared jurisdiction. Inside neighborhoods, as shown on the left side of this illustration, storm sewers and roadside ditches collect stormwater runoff and start the process of moving it away from streets and homes. Storm sewers and roadside ditches are the responsibility of the underlying municipality and Harris County Engineering in unincorporated parts of the county. The larger bayous and channels that take the collected stormwater and move it through the drainage system to the Galveston Bay are the responsibility of the Flood Control District. This is shown on the right side of the illustration. In the middle is a stormwater detention basin, sometimes constructed by the Flood Control District. When storm sewers are increased, this creates an increase in runoff. Since it is our policy to avoid impacts to properties downstream, detention basins help safely take in and temporarily store excess runoff during heavy rain events. Often, we partner with Harris County precincts, utility districts, and others to add recreational amenities such as trails to these basins and along our channels. On August 25, 2018, Harris County voters approved $2.5 billion in bonds for flood risk reduction projects. This vote followed a series of meetings across Harris County in each watershed, which resulted in a list of what is now more than 181 bond projects. 144 of those 181 bond projects have been initiated so far. A total of more than $680 million in partnership funding has been received so far. This stretches the 2018 bond program even further. The actual timing of individual projects will depend on a variety of factors, including environmental permitting, right-of-way acquisition, and utility relocations. The project lists and schedules will be updated periodically. Partnership funding is an important aspect of the 2018 bond program. This graphic illustrates the many sources of federal, state, and local funding that the Flood Control District is working to secure for Harris County. Each agency has its own definition of eligible projects and its own requirements for local match funding. The United States Army Corps of Engineers is our major partner on the Oak Bayou federal project. We will go into more detail about their contributions later in this presentation. Now, let me give you some project-specific information as it relates to the Oak Bayou federal project. Oak Bayou is the primary drainage channel in the watershed. It has several tributaries which drain into it. Some of the major tributaries are Little Oak Bayou, Bogle Creek, Cold Creek, and Brickhouse Gully. Little Oak Bayou, located along the eastern edge, Bogle Creek, located in the middle watershed, drain in from the north, while Brickhouse Gully and Cold Creek, also located in the middle of the watershed, drain in from the west. The bayou begins near US 290 and Huffmeister and flows 26 miles southeast to its confluence at Buffalo Bayou near downtown. Beginning in the 1960s, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers began working on Oak Bayou along a 10.5-mile stretch between its confluence with Buffalo Bayou upstream to Cold Creek. By the late 1970s, the United States Corps of Engineers proposed a new project to complete its work north of Cold Creek. Congress authorized the Corps of Engineers to begin the project through a Water Resources Development Act of 1986. A decade later, Congress transferred control of the Oak Bayou federal project to the Harris County Flood Control District in partnership with the United States Army Corps of Engineers. Under Section 211F of the Water Resources Development Act of 1996, the Flood Control District is responsible for the study, design, and construction of the Oak Bayou federal project. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers approved the identified project work. Following the United States Army Corps of Engineers study process, we evaluated 90 different configurations in order to meet their requirements. These included both structural and non-structural components such as stormwater detention basins, bypass channels, channel modification to Oak Bayou, and bridges across Oak Bayou. Non-structural components we looked at included elevating structures adjacent to the bayou and acquiring property adjacent to White Oak Bayou. Eventually, the United States Army Corps of Engineers approved the Flood Control District's recommended project to construct 6 new stormwater detention basins, the Jersey Village bypass, and modifications to White Oak Bayou itself between Coal Creek and FM 1960. The total cost of the project is approximately $124 million. Passage of the Bipartisan Budget Act in early 2018 included funding to complete the White Oak Bayou Federal Project, as well as projects in Brays Bayou and Hunting Bayou watersheds. As mentioned, the total cost of this project is approximately $124 million. That includes $29 million of the Harris County Flood Control District spent for right-of-way and utility relocations. Those costs will not be reimbursed by the Army Corps of Engineers. Once we complete the project, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers will reimburse us for the remaining $95 million of project costs. Approximately $50 million of that has been spent on the 6 projects constructed to date. Finishing the White Oak Bayou Federal Project will take an additional $45 million, which includes recent completion of the excavation work on Fairbanks North Detention Basin. To analyze this project, we use a 1% annual exceedance probability or 100-year rainfall event. This rain event equates to approximately 13.2 inches of rain in a 24-hour period, which is the basis for FEMA's regulatory mapping of the 1% or 100-year floodplain. We found that this event in the models indicate a reduction of the base flood elevation from a couple of inches to almost 2 feet, depending on where you live along the channel. We've already completed the majority of the work on the federal project, including excavation of new stormwater detention basins at Fallbrook and in the Ranchstone area, 1 along Beltway 8 West, 2 along Fairbanks North Houston, and 1 adjacent to Hollister Street. That's in addition to the Jersey Village bypass channel. Channel modifications to the White Oak Bayou is all that remains for this project. Some of the channel modifications have already been done. Those are indicated in green with the white hash marks on these maps. The remaining construction activities have been broken into 2 separate segments. For the approximately 10-mile upstream segment located between FM 1960 and Hollister, construction will begin in the next few months. The remaining 5 miles downstream segment from Hollister Street to the confluence with Coal Creek near Tidwell is expected to begin construction just after the first of the year. Both projects should be completed by the end of 2021. In addition to the work to the widening and deepening of White Oak Bayou, we will also be replacing and modifying storm drainage pipes that will allow the detention basins to empty back into White Oak Bayou. As an added recreation benefit, the White Oak Bayou Hike and Bike Trail from downtown Houston, which currently ends at the Hollister Stormwater Detention Basin, will be extended to the Ranchstone Stormwater Detention Basin, as depicted by the green lines on this map. The route will follow the south bank of the bayou to the West Belt Stormwater Detention Basin, then cross the bayou and follow the Jersey Village bypass channel, connecting into the existing Mud District trails. Additional trails upstream of the Mud Trail to the Ranchstone Detention Basin will also be built. Once completed, Harris County Precinct 4 will take over maintenance and upkeep of the trails, except for those under the jurisdiction of the Mud. In the interest of public safety, all trails along White Oak Bayou between Hollister and 1960, except the trail along Jersey Village bypass, will be closed for the duration of the construction period. There may be some minor traffic delays and occasional lane reductions when construction is taking place near the bridge crossings on White Oak Bayou. So what are our next steps? We expect construction to begin on the segment from 1960 to Hollister during the early fall of 2020. Construction on the final segment from Hollister to Cold Creek will likely begin sometime this winter. We will be holding a second virtual meeting to discuss that project. Both projects will be completed by the end of 2021. This work reflects the final two construction projects for the White Oak Bayou Federal Project, which represents a decade of work to a much needed relief to the surrounding area.
Thank you, Marcus, for that helpful overview of this project. Before we move into the Q&A session tonight, I want to share a quick reminder that we would love to hear from you on this and other projects rolling out across Harris County. If you have additional comments or questions throughout the life cycle of this project, or if you would like to sign up to receive email updates on this and other activity in the watershed, please visit hcfcd.org/C14 to learn more. Community engagement is a really important component of the work that we do, and we invite your continued participation as this and other projects move forward in the area. As a reminder, there are 3 ways to submit a comment about this project during tonight's session. The first is to submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream. The second is to submit a comment via the Flood Control District's website at hcfcd.org/C14. The third way is to submit a comment via phone. If you're joining us tonight via phone, please press *3 to leave a voicemail comment. Additionally, I'd like to reiterate that any questions not addressed during tonight's Q&A session will receive a response from the Flood Control District after the event. Information from this meeting and a recording of the live stream will be available on the Flood Control District's website and YouTube channel. Joining Marcus for our Q&A session tonight are Gary Zika, Federal Project Manager, and Jennifer Hobbs, Project Manager, who are both overseeing efforts on this effort. Our first question tonight I'll pose to Gary. Diane Malloy asked, will trails through Jersey Village along the bayou be part of this project? The majority of property owners along the bayou may have some concerns about that, and she'd just like a little bit more information.
This is Gary Zika. Right now, the way the trail is, as Marcus had said earlier, goes up the bypass. There's already, along the Jersey Village bypass, there's already an existing mud trail, and we're utilizing that section of the trail and going west or east from that trail underneath Beltway 8 and then down along parallel to Gessner down to the detention basin. And we are making the connection underneath Beltway 8 at White Oak into the, there's a little park and a school right there. We'll be connecting into that underneath the bayou, but we're not planning on going through Jersey Village proper with the trails.
Perfect. Thank you, Gary. That's helpful clarification. And I think we had a related question from Jason Smelzer. So I hope that also answered your question as well, sir. Jennifer, I'm going to pose our next question to you. Paul Morgan asked about plans for protecting wildlife in the bayou. Can you talk a little bit about those considerations?
Sure. Most of the environmental tasks have already been performed, but the contractor, as with all of our construction projects for Harris County Flood Control District, they'll have to do a wildlife survey before starting. So if they were to run into anything like a bald eagle's nest or something of the like, we would have to take steps to make sure we protect and avoid that.
Perfect. Thanks, Jennifer. A helpful reminder of some of the considerations that we do bring to every project. Gary, I'm going to give our next question to you. Joseph Hine asked about the fact that since the project is ending at Hollister Street, why trees might have been removed between Hollister Street and North Houston Roslyn Road along the south side of White Oak Bayou. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, that work that was done there in the last year was really just maintenance work that needed to be done. The trees were getting overgrown. There was a lot of underbrush, undesirable trees, and so they were cleared out by our maintenance crews that were in that area.
Perfect. Thanks, Gary. Marcus, I'm going to kick our next question to you. Denise Renault asked if once work is completed, will the project address or will it affect the 100-year floodplain within Jersey Village? And does it have the potential to raise it into the 500-year plain? And can you just talk about what that might look like?
Uh, yes. So while I can't speak to how it will affect insurance rate or anything like that, what I can say is that you will have a reduced risk of flooding. So with the update of Atlas 14, we have more rainfall that has been taken into account, including Harvey and Tax Day and the Memorial. So there will be some changes to what we look at now as the 500-year floodplain versus the 100-year. But everyone within the area, regardless of what those maps show, will see a reduced risk of flooding.
Perfect. Thank you, Marcus. And I know we had a question come in from Thomas Gall asking about how some of these rates match up to the Harvey numbers. So Marcus just spoke to the fact that those were taken into account here. Gary, our next question is going to come to you. Can you talk about how property owners will be notified of any property acquisitions as a result of this project?
Yeah, this the segment that we're getting ready to bid are we in the process of bidding? We've acquired all the property that we needed to. We're basically working within the right of way that we had acquired previously. So there's no acquisitions between 1960 and Hollister. There's some minor acquisitions required further downstream of Antoine. And those people have all been notified of the requirements. So we're working through that acquisitions down there presently.
Thanks, Gary. Marcus, I'm going to pose our next question to you, and this kind of zooms out from this project a little bit, but I think we all know about the 2018 bond program and how a lot of the efforts that flood control is involved in ladder up to that effort. Can you talk a little bit about how this specific project fits into the overall objectives of the bond program?
Yes, thank you. So this project has been going on for several years, and we've always had an understanding with the Corps of Engineers that we would receive funding. But after receiving the funds from the BBA, we are guaranteed that funding. So with the bond program, receiving that additional funding and the funds that we have in the bond program, this allowed us to be able to move these things a lot faster than what we normally would have. Because just to give you an idea, flood control typically operated with $60 million in capital improvement projects funds per year. Well, this project alone is much more than that. So had we not received those funds from the Corps and what we have with the bond program, then this process would have taken several years.
Thanks, Marcus. I think that's helpful context for this conversation. Jennifer, our next question is going to come your way. Fred D asked if construction will occur along the entire section from Hollister to FM 1960, or if it will occur in segments throughout the project. So does that mean that segments will be worked on simultaneously, or will it go from downstream to upstream?
Hey, great question, Fred. Since this project is on an expedited schedule, there will likely be multiple crews staged at different portions at once. Typically, we work downstream to upstream, but it will be the contractor's responsibility for care and control of water once he takes over this project and accepts the award. So however he decides to cut it up and do the project, he will still be responsible for care and control of water throughout the course of the project.
Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer. And I'm going to follow up on that question with one other. I've seen a few comments come through just about the project timeline as a whole. Could you just speak to that at a high level for us and what folks might, when they might see activity?
Sure. So with our agreement with the Corps, we need to be finished with everything by the end of 2021. And so that is what we're looking to do. And so that's the contract timeline that we've given. We expect to start work here this fall. We're receiving bids this week, and we hope to award the contract in August, this August, in the next Commissioners Court meeting, and get rolling on that, late September, early October, and be finished in late 2021.
Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer. Gary, I'm going to give our next question to you. Bob Lee asked if the project is going to be as described in the August 2014, revision of the general reevaluation report, or if there's a more recently revised document that the public should refer to for that.
This project that we're getting ready to start the construction follows the general reevaluation report. That's the basis of the agreement we have with the Army Corps of Engineers, so we've got to basically follow that. There's some more design or detailed design details that you have to put together when you actually set a package out for contractors to bid on. But it's basically following the general reevaluation report.
Perfect. Thanks, Gary. And I do just want to take a moment and pause and emphasize the fact that we do have a lot of questions coming through that are really specific, which is great. We want to make sure that we're making this as relevant to folks, in their corner of the world as possible. There are some pieces that we won't be able to speak to kind of broadly tonight because I want to make sure that Gary and Jennifer and Marcus have a little bit of time to dig into that and make sure that they're providing, really targeted information. So if you don't hear your question come through, that might be partially why. Jennifer, I'm going to give our next question to you. It's from Keith Neville. He asked how the bayou will be widened and deepened, and will that affect homeowners' land who are along the bayou?
So it'll be widened and deepened through typical excavation processes. And as far as homeowners' property, any property that we've acquired or that we're looking to acquire, we're working through that already, and homeowners have been notified, and we're working through those acquisitions. So anything else that's widened and deepened, it would be within Harris County Flood Control District easement.
Wonderful. Thank you. We have had a couple of questions come through about specific construction drawings and things like that. Those types of information, we will make all the information that we're able to about this project available as we are able to. As I mentioned, the slides from tonight's meeting will be available on the Flood Control District website, and that website really is the best place for people to continue to get updates on this and other efforts in the watershed. So just as a reminder, the best URL to visit for up-to-date and detailed information about this project is hcfcd.org/C14. That'll give you a lot more information about this federal project in particular, but it'll also provide you access to a world of information about the Flood Control District, even far past this project. Jennifer, I'm going to give our next question to you. Can you talk a little bit about the type of work that residents along the southern end of the project bounds can expect to see as we head into 2021?
Sure. So you're talking about the second segment downstream. So it'll be a lot similar to what's going on right now. There'll be deepening and widening throughout that segment of the bayou. And again, installing, I believe all the hike and bike trails. I'll push it over to Gary to kind of give any more details for the downstream segment.
Okay, on the downstream segment, it's similar work that we're doing on the upstream segment. The main reason for it being broken up between the downstream and the upstream segment is there's some right-of-way that we had acquired, as I mentioned earlier. That takes a little bit more time. There's a little bit, actually, it's a shorter section of work, and it's a little bit different down there because some of the trails are already existing down there. So I think that may have answered why we broke it up, and there really isn't that much difference. A lot of pipes that we have to replace, and a little bit of excavation and slope paving or concrete paving that we do in certain spots. There's a little bit more of that downstream than there is upstream.
Perfect. Thank you, Gary. And I do want to just take a moment and pause and thank everyone again for bearing with us through our technical issues earlier. We are going to extend tonight's meeting by about 8 minutes just to make sure we're getting through as many questions as possible. That's about the time of our technical delay. So I just wanted to let everybody know that while we're paused here. Marcus, while we're paused, I think it might be helpful for you to walk back through kind of the end of the presentation that we went through, just giving a little bit of a high-level overview of what we're looking at and what the Flood Control District's plans are. So would you mind doing that for us, maybe just starting with some of the project specifics here?
Sure.
Okay, great.
So I guess, so some of what we're working on right now, we're in the design phase of the project. We're looking at probably completing and starting construction closer to the end of the year. The 10.5 miles upstream between Hollister and FM 1960 will begin in the next few months. And like we said, the downstream segment from Hollister to Cold Creek near Tidwell, we're looking at that construction about the first of the year. Again, with both projects expecting to end around the end of 2021. We'll be also modifying outfall drainage pipes from the detention basins that go back into the bayou. Like we talked before, we're replacing the hike and bike trails by extending the trail that currently goes from Hollister to downtown Houston. We're also looking at additional trails upstream of the mud to the Ranchstone Detention Basin. And again, these are in partnership with the precinct. So Harris County Flood Control District will construct those trails, and the precinct will take them over for maintenance once we're complete.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Marcus. Appreciate that quick overview. Just in case anybody joined late and wanted to have a little quick recap. Gary, I'm going to send our next question to you. I think it would be great to just provide a little bit of clarification around the hike and bike trails that we highlighted. I just want to make sure that folks understand which trails are going to be closed and where new ones may be going in.
Okay, on this particular slide, if you look at on the right-hand side, you can see where it's the new trail is going to be going up parallel to Gessner, and then it starts heading west, goes underneath Beltway 8. And once you get past Beltway 8, you have that dog park there on the north side, and there's a trail that starts there and then runs along, goes due west along the Jersey Village bypass. That segment of the trail will still remain open. We're only putting the trail in from the dog park to the east. But once you get all the way to the end at the other big detention basins, that's on the far west end of the Jersey Village bypass, that trail there will be closed around the detention basin and north up towards the school, the Cypher school that's up there. And because we'll be working on the channel itself along that segment of the channel, but we will not be doing anything along the Jersey Village bypass. So there is a section that'll still be open that the public will have access from the dog park. And then I think there's a couple intermediate places, and you get out the pedestrian bridge that crosses a lateral channel in there. All that will still be open.
Perfect. Thanks, Gary. That's helpful clarification. And I neglected to mention that question came in from Candace Worth. So thank you so much for submitting. Jennifer, I'm going to send our next question over to you, and it's actually a two-parter. So I'll just give you the first part first, and then once you're finished with that one, I'll give you the second part. Can you talk through the target substantial completion and final completion dates for this project, going back to the timeline a little bit?
Right. So again, the target completion is December 2021 for both projects. And it's not really much of a difference that the public would see between substantial and final completion. And as far as, oh, you didn't ask the second part of the question yet. I already saw it. Sorry.
That's okay.
I think Gary had something to add on this one too.
Yeah, perfect.
On the recreational components too, there are at the different detention basins, not only do we have the trail up and down the channel, but at the detention basins, we've got loops around the detention basins themselves. And there'll also be limited parking, like a trailhead parking at each one of the detention basins, so that people can come to park at the detention basin and then go along the trail, either go around the detention basin or continue on the main trail up and down White Oak.
Perfect. Thanks, Gary. Jennifer, I'm going to come back to you for our next question from Doreen Gallego. She asked if the banks of the bayou throughout the project will remain natural or if there'll be more paved slopes.
Sure. Most of the bayou, you're going to see it's going to be grass for the most part. There is going to be some concrete around certain areas where, for instance, like around the bridges or around certain outfall structures where we have to do that for slope requirements and for mowing purposes around the outfalls as well. But for the most part, it's going to be grass lined.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Jennifer. Marcus, our next question is going to come to you. Can you talk a little bit about, obviously this is a special project in that it's a federal project and there are a lot of folks involved. Can you talk a little bit about how we work with other agencies on initiatives like this one, but also just projects across the county?
Yes, so we always like to try to find partners for projects. Sometimes our work is outside of areas. For example, like the exhibit that shows the jurisdictional responsibilities, things that are happening within neighborhoods, roadside ditches, storm sewers, those type of projects. It's outside of the Harris County Flood Control District's ability to be able to push funding towards those. So one of the ways we work with other municipalities and Harris County Engineering in the county is by, if they want to upsize the size of their infrastructure and the capacity of our bayous isn't there to take in that flow, then we will work with them to provide the capacity for them to be able to increase their storm sewers without increasing the flooding downstream. We also partnership on recreational facilities, much like Gary just spoke about now, where we will work with another agency to install trails or other recreational facilities that the public can use. And the sponsorship portion is that sometimes the district finds that funding from some other source, or it comes from the municipality or one of the precincts or something like that, and they just maintain it. So sometimes we'll construct it. Sometimes after we finish, we leave space for them to come in and do the work.
Perfect. Thanks, Marcus. That's helpful clarification. Gary, our next question is going to come to you. Jim Mackey asked if there will be any bridge modifications or replacements as a result of this project, whether that's road or rail bridges.
Okay, the actual bridges themselves won't be modified, but we'll be doing a lot of work around those bridges. For one aspect is underneath where the channel is going, we've got to get the proper cross section, and each one of the bridges we're actually going to be doing a lot of slope paving underneath the bridges. It's always an area of maintenance that we've got to work through, so we're putting a lot of concrete underneath those bridges. A couple of the older bridges, we've actually put retaining walls underneath the bridge in order to get the cross section that we need underneath the bridge. The public traveling over those bridges won't see much impact from, except for trucks going in and out or accessing at that points, but we are also modifying the storm drains that go along the roads that go into the bayou. And there's going to be at some points that we're going to be between like the north and south roads or actually into some of the pavements. So there'll be some lane closures. We don't expect anything more than just daily lane closures that the public will see along the roads.
Perfect. Thanks, Gary. And I think that also answered Michael Walters asked about any impact to traffic flow. So appreciate, I think you just happened to naturally cover that in your response. One thing that I wanted to highlight while I'm giving folks a chance to submit any additional questions is, again, just reiterating how to stay up to date on this project. I think this is something that is really critical for us to share with you. We do want to emphasize that up-to-date information on this and other projects in the watershed is available at hcfcd.org/C14. That takes you directly to information about the project we're discussing tonight, but it also gives you access to the full suite of projects that the Flood Control District is working on, as well as links to some of our partners as well. I also want to emphasize kind of how we're looking forward at the next 2 weeks. So after this meeting, we do have a comment period open for this project. However, that does not end our engagement with the public. We welcome comments, questions, suggestions throughout the life cycle of this and every project that we work on. But through the comment period, please feel free to submit comments online on this website, on the Flood Control District's website, or via phone. Again, the Flood Control District's website URL is hcfcd.org/C14. There will also be a live recording of this meeting available on that site and the Flood Control District's YouTube channel. It's an easy place for everybody to go back and reference kind of throughout the life cycle of the project. As we kind of move forward, Jennifer, I think it would be great if you could talk a little bit about any of the kind of additional improvements that are being made as part of this project, whether those are drainage improvements to get to the channel, or kind of what the big picture outside of just the channel itself looks like.
I'm going to pass that one over to Gary. He can give a better detail.
Perfect.
Okay, and then the general statement is that the first part of this project was building the 6 big detention basins that we had to do. They were going to store over, or actually have stored over 3,000 acre feet of water in those 6 detention basins, being Hollister, the Fairbanks, North Houston, the Beltway 8, and then the Ranchstone and Fallbrook detention basins. During Harvey, they all were completely full with water, and that's exactly what we want them to do. With those detention basins taking off some of the water, that's where we're able to do the channel improvements, and also with the bypass around Jersey Village. One of the big, and that's the biggest component about this, is trying to get the water past the choke point through Jersey Village being a more established area. But there was enough planning ahead of time that the bypass cuts through the highland, and so that's where a lot of people look at the bypass not having enough water in it, when Jersey Village has got high water and the bypass is still high and dry, so to speak. There's still a lot of water flowing down the bypass, but because it's cutting through the highlands, it's not ever going to be full. That's one of the big components that we've got with the bypass. We don't normally do bypasses just because it's a lot harder to do them, but we were able to do it with the detention basins and the other channel improvements on this project.
Perfect. Thank you, Gary. And I'm actually going to stick with you for our next question. Can you just talk a little bit about the water service elevation reductions that Marcus referenced during the presentation? Are those for remaining projects from August 2020 forward, or do they represent total cumulative reductions inclusive of past completed projects?
Yeah, they represent the total of the project, which includes all the detention basins. So a lot of the benefit that you're already getting is from the detention basins, and we still have the channel to work. That'll get us the final total reductions that you're seeing on that slide that Marcus had talked about earlier. So that was in the original general reevaluation report, and so that's the same benefits that we had to maintain for the project, and our final engineering studies that show what we're doing for the project supported those benefits. And that's part of that we have to confirm with the Army Corps of Engineers, is that the benefit of the project is lowering the water surface, and that's the benefit of keeping water out of homes and businesses. That's the dollar benefits that the Army Corps of Engineers requires us to get. And of course, the cost is the cost of building it, buying the right of way, and that gets down to our benefit to cost ratio.
Perfect. Thanks, Gary. Jennifer, our next question is going to come to you. Virgil and Catherine Osborne asked if excavations and other work will be done Monday through Friday, and kind of what the hours we're looking at might be for that work.
Sure, good question. So the contractor, while we can't hold them to say Monday through Friday, they could work Saturday and Sunday. What we can hold them to is noise ordinances for Jersey Village, for City of Houston, Harris County. They'll have to abide by all those noise ordinances and be compliant with that.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Gary, I'm actually going to kick our next question to you, and it's a little bit more of a general question, but can you talk a little bit about the history of this project, kind of where we've come from and how we've gotten here today?
Yeah, the overall project was, it really started back in '86 and then '96. It takes a long time for the Army Corps of Engineers to work out a partnership and then come up with a final design. They just don't say, well, let's just make the channel wider and let's just make detention basins. They've got to go through the one slide that Marcus had that talked about all these different components. They get all these different components: detention basins, channel improvements, how wide the channel improvements are, how big the detention basins are, and they've got to get it down to what the best benefit to cost ratio is. And of course, the cost is the components, how much it's going to do to construct those. The benefit is how much water lowering of that base water flood is. And the reason that's important is that's how we get the funding, is that we have to compete nationwide with all projects in the U.S. that the Army Corps of Engineers is working with, and then you've got to have a high benefit to cost ratio. You got a benefit to cost ratio of 1 or 2, you're going to be on the bottom of the list rather than 6 or 7 like we've got on White Oak. And so since we've got a good benefit to cost ratio, we've been able to get funding. And then the latest has been the bipartisan act after Harvey that guaranteed the balance of the work to be funded out. We still have to still recoup some of the costs or get reimbursements from the Army Corps of Engineers for the work that we did before the bipartisan act. But they've been slowly coming up with the funds, and so we've got an agreement with them. So it's going to take a little time before it all gets appropriated to us.
Wonderful, thank you. I think that's a helpful trajectory for, again, where we started and where we are now. Marcus, I'm going to kick our next question to you. We've had a couple of comments come in about how this ties into the Inwood Forest project. So can you just address that for us?
Yeah, so they are 2 separate projects. The Inwood Forest project is another project that we're actually that's actually in design right now. We do plan on having a separate meeting about Inwood Forest, but in general, it will provide benefits for the White Oak Bayou watershed. It's one of the 12 projects that we have going on in the White Oak Bayou watershed, all of those in various stages. Right now, we have a couple in PER. We have a couple of detention basins, and we also have a couple of partnerships projects along tributaries within the White Oak Bayou watershed. So while they're not tied together directly, they do play a part in a watershed-wide reduction.
Perfect. Thanks, Marcus. A good reminder that it all works together. Gary, I'm going to pose our next question to you. We've had a couple of additional questions come through about the water surface elevation reductions. Can you just go back over that information for us? And then I may have a quick follow-up question for you.
And I guess if you could go back to that slide, and it shows ranges from it's starting at the upper end of 0.3, and then it shows it goes down to 0.5. Then looks like through Jersey Village, it's 0.3 to 1.8. And there's ranges in there because of the channel. As we're doing improvements, there might be a choke point at a bridge. And so we help the water get past that bridge. And so that right around that bridge, we have a bigger improvement than away from that bridge. And so that's why there's variations in those numbers. And of course, those variations, they're not going from 0.3 to 1.8 right within 50 feet of each other. That's over that range. So we've got the 0.3 to 1.8, that's from Beltway 8 all the way up to where the bypass goes. So you've got to, it's, when we look at these things, they're numbers, and there's a lot of calculations that go into those numbers. And so what we're trying to do is show that there's a range of improvements from the point, the 1/10 of a foot, which is on the very downstream end, to the around the Jersey Village area is the highest, which is 1.8 feet. So it is ranges, and that's just because it's a very dynamic channel that's got a lot of water flowing down it.
Thanks, Gary. Appreciate that. One thing I did want to remind folks, we've seen a lot of comments come through about other projects and areas in the watershed. I do just want to remind people that we will be following up after the meeting on these types of comments. Tonight, we're really honed in and focused on the White Oak Federal Project and want to make sure that we're sharing as much information about that project as we can. However, other questions that came in, we'll make sure that we're following up after this and continuing this conversation as it moves forward. We want to make sure that we're being as responsive as possible. In the meantime, please always feel free to visit hcfcd.org. Again, if you go to /C14, that'll take you directly to this project, but it will also give you a window into the full scope of work within the White Oak watershed, but also the entire county as well. Gary, our next question is going to come back to you. It's from Lisa McElmore. Can you talk a little bit about how hike and bike trails came into the equation? Is there a flood risk reduction element to those, or are they just an add-on?
Yeah, because there's federal money involved, we have to follow the NEPA process. And during the NEPA process of answers and questions, is that was one of the components that there was a need for additional recreation components in this section of the project. And so once there was shown a need, the original general evaluation report had addressed that and showed that there was going to be a certain cost. Well, all the way up into the bipartisan act, we did not have funding. The Corps said we would not get funding for the recreational component because it doesn't help the improved flooding. However, during the bipartisan act, the 2018 bipartisan act did allow us to get funding for the trails. And so with a partnership with Precinct 4, where the federal government pays for the construction, and then Precinct 4 will take over the maintenance of those trails in the future. So flood control will be helping do the manage of the construction, and it makes sense as we're doing the construction of the channel, redoing the pipes, is that the final thing that we're going to be working on will be doing the trails. So it'll be concurrent construction. It just makes sense to do that construction all at one time.
Perfect. Thanks, Gary. Marcus, I want to actually kick back to you for our next question. If we can go back to the slide that delineates the jurisdictional responsibilities within Harris County. We've had a couple of voicemail comments come through. Just a reminder that that's an option for participating. From folks who have a couple of questions about neighborhood flooding and street flooding. So I think it would be helpful for us to go back over this information, and Marcus, if you don't mind leading us through that.
Sure, thanks. So what we're looking at here on this exhibit is to the left, you have what's labeled as city / municipal jurisdiction. What that means is most neighborhoods have either a roadside ditch or a storm sewer. Some of the infrastructure is much older, and it was based on previous data for rainfall for what how you would design your storm sewer systems or the size of your roadside ditches. Well, as time goes on, the rainfall starts to increase because we have more data, and so you find out that the amount of rainfall that a neighborhood was initially designed for no longer works. So in order to prevent those neighborhoods from flooding, they have to increase the size of the storm sewers or convert from roadside ditch to storm sewer, or increase the size of the ditches. Well, when you do that, it releases more water into a bayou. Harris County has a policy of no adverse impact. So by increasing the size of those culverts, which is shown on this exhibit as what looks like it's gone from a round pipe to a larger box structure, that pushes more water into the bayou. Well, there's a couple of ways you can deal with that. You can either add more capacity to the channel, which only pushes the increases to the bayou downstream. So eventually, at some point, there has to be a detention basin, or you create some type of inline storage in the bayou. We typically don't prefer not to do inline storage, so we use detention basins. And so the way that the Harris County Flood Control District works is to be that entity that would prevent the flooding from an aspect of a bayou. So I know everyone that was a part of Harvey, Tax Day, Memorial Day. Some people flooded and said, well, I'm not in the floodplain. How did I flood and I'm not in the floodplain? The floodplain is meant to show what happens if the water spills out of the bayou. So if it's spilling out of the bayou, most of the times, if it's Harris County Flood Control District's right of way, then it's Harris County Flood Control District's responsibility to try to reduce that flooding. But if it's in the neighborhood, then it's the responsibility of, again, Harris County Engineering within the county, in unincorporated Harris County, or whatever municipal district or city that's responsible for that infrastructure. And our partnership portion is developing those detention basins, which sort of work in the middle. This middle portion here called shared jurisdiction, where Harris County Flood Control District will contribute to or construct a detention basin to sort of help mitigate some of those impacts that are a result of either increased capacity to a subdivision or to pull flows off of the channel from doing channel improvements, which is what we're seeing here in this project. We have the detention basins in place so that when we increase the capacity of the channel, the detention basins are there to prevent the increase of the capacity of the channel from impacting people that are downstream.
Thanks, Marcus. I think that's always a helpful message. Now we've had a question come in about easements. So Gary, can you just talk a little bit about easements generally and also the long-term maintenance associated with those pieces?
Yes, the easements, we've got either the Harris County Flood Control outright owns the property outright, which we call fee, or it's their easements, and that's where the underlying property owner will probably be the adjacent homeowners or sometimes businesses. And those easements that we've got give us the right that we could do the channel improvements and to maintain the channel in that section. It's also part of the requirements for the Army Corps of Engineers being a project is they want to make sure that the invested money that goes into the project can be maintained over the long run. And so not only do we have to go in there and do the work to construct it, but we also have to have a way to maintain the project after it's done. So presently, there's a few areas that we've got what we call encroachments where the property owners have gone and moved fences to like top of bank, but that's not where the easement is. The easement is further back. And so we've got to be able to work in those easement areas, the full easement to the extent that we've got as an easement for flood control, to put what we call a backslope swale system that's to keep water from draining over the tops of the bank. And then be able to take equipment, whether it's dump trucks, concrete trucks, excavators, even having the mowers having access in there. So we got to maintain it in the long run. And so when we do have repairs, we'll be able to easily go back in there and instead of trying to figure out how to get into these, into the different job sites where we have failures going on. And over the years, like through Jersey Village, we've probably had at least 10 different projects over the last 10 years. Just about one a year that we're doing something in just between Beltway 8 and the bypass. There are areas that need to be repaired because of the way the configuration is now. Hopefully when we're done, we'll have improvements through that area that we won't have as much maintenance, but we still have to be able to get in there and tackle those maintenance hot spots that we get, take care of them before they get out of hand.
Thanks, Gary. I think that's a helpful reminder for folks, especially as we're moving into that phase of this project. Now, Gary, I'm going to stick with you for our next question. I think it'd be helpful for us to go back to this slide about the alternatives that were considered for this project. Can you just give us a little bit of context around those alternatives and, the breadth of the options that were considered?
Yeah, so there was the 90 different configurations evaluated, and it was combinations of channel modifications. And as I said earlier, is that the channel width, whether it was 20 feet wide, 30 feet wide, or 40 feet wide, they had to run through different scenarios of seeing which one gave us the best benefit with the least amount of cost. And the same thing with the detention basins. Not only was the detention basins the final 6 that we had, but there were different sizes at those locations, and there was also additional detention basins. So they all had to be run through the scenarios. The bypass channel was another big component around Jersey Village. They also looked at levees. Could we protect areas with levees? And levees have a lot of information. It's just not a levee. You've got to install pumps, and you've got to install. You also have to have a lot of right of way for those levees in order to be built to the Army Corps of Engineers standards. The other component that we looked at was bridge replacements. Every one of the bridges, they would look at could we make the bridge longer? When we say longer, meaning spanning the bayou longer. So if you have an area where you're putting a 30-foot channel in there and say you want to go to a 100-foot channel, well, you're going to have to replace the bridge. So some of these go hand in hand. If you have big wide channels, you're going to have to do more bridge replacements. And so as you run through all the different combinations, you find out what works, what gets you the most benefit for the least amount of cost. The non-structural components, evaluations of structures, that's the individual homes, whether it made sense for buyouts or could you elevate those structures? Jersey Village is doing a little bit of that. They've got some grants that they're able to, some of the homes in Jersey Village proper that they've gotten grants to raise those structures. Very costly. For us, it didn't work out for a positive benefit to cost ratio for doing elevation of homes. So there's a lot that goes into it, a lot of analysis, because you're trying to find the right mix, and it's you've got guidelines that you got to follow with the Army Corps of Engineers to come up with the best benefit to cost ratio.
Perfect. Thanks, Gary. I think people know how much goes into these projects, but the amount of planning is, it's really robust, and it's a great process that everybody goes through. Now, with that, I want to share one final reminder that we're continuing to accept comments and feedback through this project through the comment period, but we also welcome your engagement throughout the duration of this project's life cycle. I want to thank you again for joining us this evening, for being patient with us through our technical delays at the top, and for your continued engagement with this project. We look forward to continuing to sharing updates as our work moves forward. I hope everyone stays safe and has a wonderful and restful evening.